Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Patriots History. I'm Larry Swikart, your host, co-author of Patriots History of the United States, now available with a new update. I will be sending those out probably in the next 2 weeks. Go from 2018 to 2025, two new chapters. I'm editing them right now. They are finished. So you'll want to make sure you email me and say, hey, send me the new chapters. Also, new book coming out. America in the 21st Century, available February 6th. If you want autographed copies, I can't get them to you by Christmas, obviously, but I can get you autographed copies. So let me know. Email me at larry@wildworldhistory.com and we'll work it out. Okay, so we are now in our third installment of Eugene V. Debs, the socialist candidate in 1908, and his acceptance speech. And I apologize, I keep arguing with this guy. I find him so, well, stupid at times that I just can't let it pass. So I'm going to start on the bottom of page 246 and see if we can't get through this sucker today. So I'm tired of listening to him. Okay. I know by very close study of the question exactly how men become idle. I don't repel them when I meet them. I have never yet seen the tramp I was not able to receive with open arms. He's less fortunate than I. He is made the same as I am made. That's true, but so what? All horses aren't Secretariat. All quarterbacks are not Tom Brady. He is the child of the same father. Well, yes, but you got to acknowledge your father. All men are not brothers because all men do not know God, Jehovah, as their father. Some call Muhammad father, others call nobody father. If you and I are brothers, we got to have the same father. Had I been born in his environment, I would have been subjected to the same things he was. I should be where he is. This is the old argument, right? From Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, the old nature versus nurture. Are some people just wired to succeed, or is it just all the environment? And of course, it's a little bit of each. You have to have some basic material to work with, but I want you to consider something. And I know I'm already slowing down. I'm sorry. But this is pretty important. So this is Ron Chernow's book, Alexander Hamilton. I want to read you something about Hamilton's childhood. He and his brother, between 1765 and 1769, their father had vanished, their mother had died, their cousin and supposed protector had committed bloody suicide, and their aunt, uncle, and grandmother had all died. James, 16, and Alexander, 14, were left alone, largely friendless and penniless. Every step in their rootless, topsy-turvy existence, they had been surrounded by failed, broken, embittered people. Their short lives had been shadowed by a stupefying sequence of bankruptcies, marital separations, deaths, scandals, and disinheritance. Such repeated shocks must have stripped Alexander Hamilton of any sense that life was fair. And yet, he became easily the best Secretary of the Treasury we've ever had. He taught himself to read. He taught or learned to read with the help of another. He taught himself economics and finances. He taught himself military skills. So I don't buy this thing that, well, if you were born in his situation, you'd be in the same place. Maybe, maybe not. But there's certainly no evidence that if he was born in your situation, he would be better off. While I am sympathetic to those who are in destitution because of no fault of their own, accidents of the economy or whatnot, okay, and they do happen, but they're very in the minority. Most people that you see who are homeless are there because they will not give up their drugs or their alcohol. A few are there because they just don't want the confines of a home. Anyway, so let's keep going, see if we can get through this. This is Debs. Your material interest in mind and society of the future will be the same instead of having to fight each other like animals as we do today and seeking to glorify the brute struggle for existence, which every civilized human being ought to be ashamed. Instead of this, our material interests are going to be mutual. We're going to jointly own the mammoth machines and we're going to operate them as joint partners and we're going to divide the profits among them, products among ourselves. Okay. I'm a big fan of the old NFL announcer, John Madden, color man, John Madden. Yeah, later in life, he got to be pretty basic, pretty obvious in it. Oh, there, Nate Newton had to pull his pants up because his pants were falling down, things like that. But he always said something that stuck with me, and this he had to do with a pass rushing defensive end, but it really is applicable in life. And he said of this pass rushing defensive end, if you got one move, you got no moves. Meaning, if they can predict what you're going to do every single time, you don't have a chance. They'll be able to defend you every single time. And so, whenever you see socialist societies begin to divide the wealth among everybody, what happens? Within a very short time, certain people own almost all the wealth, just as it is in capitalism. The only difference is in socialism, they use the government to do so. Show me one communist socialist leader who lived like the people. Probably Mao came the closest, but he had to kill 40 million people to get to that position. Stalin had to kill 30 million. Okay. So the funny thing about capitalism is it doesn't have to kill anybody to get where it's going. It's natural. It's what people want to do. We're not going to send out our surplus to the Jim Hills, Goulds, and Vanderbilts in New York. We're not going to pile up $1 billion in John D. Rockefeller's hands, a vast pyramid from the height of which he can look down with scorn and contempt upon the common herd. John D. Rockefeller's great fortune is built upon your ignorance. No. Here I am again. No. John D. Rockefeller's fortune was built on serving his fellow men. What did he say? He said the common man must have kerosene and he must have it good and he must have it cheap. Rockefeller dedicated his life to giving people cheap energy that would make their lives better. In the process, he almost single-handedly saved the whales because whaling was making whales extinct because indoor lighting was all done by whale oil. And Rockefeller replaced that. This is simply a lie on Debs's part. Rockefeller didn't get rich on the backs of others. He got rich making other people's lives better. Holy cow. And while I do not care for the tactics of Jim Fisk, Jay Gould, those guys made people's lives better because they built railroads. James J. Hill built listen to this, the only transcontinental railroad that didn't need a dime of government support, called the Great Northern Railroad. Well, when all of the government subsidized railroads failed and all those guys were out of work, how did that make them feel? In the 1890s, one railroad kept working. James J. Hill's Great Northern Railroad. So, when you know enough to know what your interest is, you will support the party that is organized upon the basis of the collective ownership of the means of life. Well, no. People knew what their interest was and they rejected that. See, anytime you reject communism or socialism, which majorities always do, they're deemed stupid. And it starts right here with him. Okay, this party will sweep, speaking of his own party, this party will sweep into power upon the issue of wage slavery, just as Republicanism swept into power upon the issue of chattel slavery half a century ago. No, America has never been socialistic and never will be. I don't care who the mayor of New York City is. In the meantime, don't have any fear about socialists. We don't mean any harm, which is exactly what they say before they start rounding people up and killing them by the millions. Many of you have been taught to look upon us as dangerous people. Well, yeah, that's because you are. It's amazing to what extent prejudice has taken root. No, it's not prejudice. It's evidence. The capitalist press tells you of good many things that we socialists are going to do and what we do not intend to do. They tell you we're going to break up the home. That's what they say they want. Read the Grimke sisters. Read Robert Owens, whom we've read here before. He wanted to do away with God and the family and the home. Absolutely. Okay. They tell you that we are going to break up the home. Great heavens. What about the homes of the 4 million tramps that are looking for work today? Well, they don't have homes. They're living in tents. What about the thousands and thousands of miserable shacks in New York and every great city where humanity festered? Well, isn't that a home? So you start to get into this business of, well, you're living in a hovel. Well, I kind of like my home. What's wrong with my home? Well, it's not good enough. Well, says who? Says me. The elites always want to make you think you're not living in a good enough situation. And so you need to listen to them and they'll get you into a better situation. How about let's see, it would be a good thing if they were torn down and obliterated completely, for they are not fit for human habitation. This is what liberals and socialists will always do. They will always tear down what is working or what is good in order to build what is perfect, which can never be built. Okay, they'll always destroy the good in favor of the perfect. And then whine when the perfect doesn't take shape, and they will blame everybody else. Well, it would have happened if not for John D. Rockefeller. No, we're going to destroy the home. We're going to make the home possible for the first time in history, which they absolutely did not do. I challenge you, how many of you want to live in one of those gulag-looking Russian structures left over from the Soviet Union, or how many of you want to live in an American suburb? You may think you're very comfortable. See? Well, you think you're comfortable. You're not. We're going to tell you you're not. You may not agree with me. I don't expect you to, and I don't ask you to do. So I'm going to ask you to remember what I say this afternoon, perhaps before I'm elected president of the United States, you will know it is true. Now, there are those of you who have fairly comfortable under the present standard. Isn't it amusing to you how little the average man is satisfied with? No. In fact, Paul in the Bible says, I've learned to be content in whatever condition I am in. I have a lot, great. If I don't have a lot, great. If I'm rich, great. If I'm poor, great. I've learned to be content. The Bible compels you, orders you to be content with what you have. So again, it's very clear Debs doesn't know the Bible. You go out here to the edge of town and you will find a small farmer who has a cabin, just room enough to keep himself and his wife, 2 or 3 children, which has a mortgage on it. He works early and late just to get enough in net returns to keep him working order, and he will enthuse about the wonderful prosperity of the country. He's satisfied, and that is his calamity. Well, he was just telling us how great Lincoln was in this exact situation. See the hypocrisy here? Now the majority of you would say that's his good fortune. It is a blessing that he is satisfied. As a matter of fact, it's a curse to him and to society that he is satisfied. Well, excuse me, I thought keeping up with the Joneses was a capitalist problem. If he'd not been for the discontent of the few fellows who've not been satisfied with their condition, you would still be living in caves. You never would have emerged from the jungle. Intelligent discontent is the mainspring of civilization. Does that include intelligent discontent about socialism? There, Gene. Progress is born of agitation, agitation of stagnation. I have taken my choice. You have plenty of money. The poorest people on this earth are those who have the most money. Well, now, wait a minute. Now he's saying the rich people are poor because they don't have what you have in poverty. You may not have much money, but you've got God loves you and you've got a loving family. He's all over the map here. A man is said to be poor when he has none, but he is a pauper who has nothing else. Now, this farmer, what does he know about literature? Well, Lincoln knew a lot about literature. Davy Crockett carried a copy of Benjamin Franklin's autobiography with him everywhere, including to the Alamo. After his hard day's work, he sits in his shack, he's fed, and his animal wants are satisfied. It is at that time a man ought to begin to live. It is not while you work and slave that you live. It's when you have done your work honestly, when you've contributed your share to the common fund, that you begin to live. Well, yes and no. Paul said, in all things be content. He said, slaves, do your jobs well. Masters, and be kind to your slaves. Then, as Whitman said, you take out your soul, you can commune with yourself, you can take a comrade by the hand, you can look into his eyes, down the soul, and the communion you live. And if you don't know what that is, or if you're not the least on edge of it, it is denied you to even look into the promised land. Once again, this is so elitist. You don't know what I know. If you knew what I knew, you'd do what I say I'm going to do. Now, this farmer knows nothing, there it is, knows nothing about the literature of the world. In fact, many of these farmers are very well read. All its libraries are sealed to him. As far as he's concerned, Homer and Dante and Dickens might as well have not lived. Beethoven, Liszt, and Wagner, and all those musicians whose art makes the common atmosphere rich with melody, have never been. For this farmer, he knows nothing about literature or art, never rises above the animal plane. With 15 minutes after he has ceased to live, he's forgotten, and the next generation doesn't know his name, and the world doesn't even know he lived. This is the life under the present standard. Folks, it's the life under all standard. I hate to tell you, I've written maybe 30 books. 25 years after I'm gone, very few people are ever going to remember my name. Some people might still read the book. It's life. You're forgotten. Even the greatest names eventually fade into obscurity. You don't know the names of half the Roman emperors who owned and controlled more wealth and more people than most of the people in the entire world at the time. And now they're forgotten, right? By the way, do you happen to know who put up all the artwork for the National Art Gallery? That's what it's called, the National Art Gallery in Washington, D.C. All of our greatest art treasures are there. You know who put up the one on the West Coast called the Getty Museum? Well, you know that one, right? The National Art Gallery was donated art. All of it was art donated by Andrew Millen, the very wealthy Secretary of the Treasury who collected art. And at one point he said, this art shouldn't just be for me, it ought to be for the people. And he donated it all to the US government, put up the money to build the National Art Gallery, and then said, don't put my name on it. It's the People's Art Gallery. How many of those did Stalin donate? By the way, where will that farmer go to look at art? To the National Art Gallery. You tell me, this is all the farmer is fit for. What do I propose to do for the farmer? Nothing. I simply want to awaken the farmer to the fact that he's robbed every day of the week. And if I can do that, he will fall into line with the socialist movement. Yeah, fall into line is right. Or we will make him. And will march to the polls on election day, and instead of casting his vote to fasten the shackles upon his limb more firmly, he will vote for his emancipation. Yeah, they did that, and they didn't elect you, Gene. You got fewer votes than the other guys by a fraction, just a fraction of the votes the other guys. All I have to do is show that farmer, that day laborer, that tramp, that they are victims of the system. There it is, victims. That their interests are identical, that they constitute the million, and that the millions have the votes. The Rockefeller have the dollars, but we have the votes, and we have sense enough to know how to use the votes. We will not only have the votes, but the dollars for all children of men. Well, for the longest time, the Democrat Party had the dollars. They constantly outraised Republicans. They outraised Donald Trump 10, 15 to 1, and he still beat them. Why? He had the votes. This seems quite visionary to some of you, and especially to those of you who know absolutely nothing about economics. I could not begin to tell you the story of social evolution this afternoon, of how these things are doing this day, or how the world is being pushed into socialism. Even today, it really isn't. And how it is bound to arrive no matter whether you're for it or against it. It's a next inevitable phase of civilization. It isn't a scheme. It isn't a contrivance. Yes, it is. It's a lie. It isn't anything that's made to order. Yeah, it is. It's just like everybody else. When you're a socialist, you have no identity. The day is coming when you'll be pushed into it by unseen bands, whether you will or not. Usually those unseen bands are a government with an army that has rifles. I venture into the prophecy that within the next few years, you'll be almost completely dispossessed. You're howling against the trusts, and the trusts are laughing at you. You keep on voting in the same old way, and the trusts will keep on getting what you produce. You say Congress will give you relief. Good heavens, who will save us from Congress? Don't you know that Congress is made up almost wholly of trust lawyers and corporation attorneys? I don't happen to know the role of this one, but with few exceptions, they are all lawyers. Now, the competitive system, the lawyer sells himself to the highest bidder, the same as the working man does. Who's the highest bidder? The corporation, of course. So the trust buys the best lawyer, and the common herd gets the worst one. Well, I don't know where to start with it. This is so much garbage. Now, we socialists propose that society in its collective capacity shall produce, not for profit, but in the abundance to satisfy all human wants, that every man shall have an unalienable right to work and receive the full equivalent of what he produces. You have the right to work right now. What you don't have is the right to get paid. We've been over this in the last 2 times. If you produce junk, if you produce crap art, if you produce crap music, if you're bad at what you do, most important, if you do not improve the life of your fellow man, if you do not serve your fellow man, you will not have anything, because your purpose on this earth is to make other people's lives better. Now, we socialists propose that society in its collective capacity shall produce not for profit, but for abundance that will satisfy all human wants, that every man shall have an inalienable right to work and receive the full equivalent of what he produces, that every man stand fearlessly erect in the pride and majesty of his own manhood, that every man and woman shall be economically free. Doesn't happen, not in any society, certainly not in any communist society. We're not going to destroy private property. Oh, yes, you are. Be honest, Gene. We're going to so establish private property that every worker may have all the private property necessary to house and keep him in comfort and satisfy all his physical wants. What if he wants to sell that private property for drugs? What if he wants to gamble that private property away? Then it's not really his, is it? It's yours. 80% of the people in the United States have little or no property of any kind today. A few have got it all. They have dispossessed the people, and when we get into power, we will dispossess them. A little note, you'll always see this lie that, well, 10% of Americans own 80% of the wealth or something like that. First of all, remember that half of all Americans are under 20. You have no wealth as a kid or even a young person. Why? Because it takes time to build wealth. My wife and I, live in a pretty extravagant home, one I never thought I'd be able to afford, one with a pool. I never thought I'd have that as a kid. But that wasn't our first house. Our first house was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house for $65,000. That was in the 80s. My dad bought a house in Chandler in the 1950s for $10,000. He was a ranch foreman, and nevertheless, he was good enough with money in order to buy a second house that was his, not the one the ranch gave us to live in, a second car. He had 40 acres of his own that he worked, and he and Mom bought 18 cabins in the White Mountains that they rented out during the summer season for profit. All on the salary of a ranch manager. Don't tell me you can't get ahead in America. Competition was natural and constructive once, but do you think you are competing today? Many of you think you are. Against whom? Against Rockefeller? As I would have had a wheelbarrow and competed with the Santa Fe from here to Kansas City. What is it? Well, who did Henry Ford compete with? Henry Ford competed with Butterfield, Overland Stage, Wells Fargo, and beat all 3 of them. About as I would have this is about the way you are competing, but your boys will not have that chance. No, they'll have a better chance. You hear of the late panic. It's very late. It's going to be very late. The panic will be with us 5 years from now and will continue from now to then. No, it did. It did. There was no panic in 1912. There was no panic in 1913. There was no panic in 1914. There was no panic in 1915. There was no panic in 1960. There obviously was no panic in 1917 through 1920 because the war was on. And when the government's spending money, everybody's in a good place. There was a very slight panic in 1920 as all the guys came home from war and were searching about for their jobs, and it was gone by 1921. How many of you have heard of the Great Depression of 1920? None, because none existed. They said, let it go, it'll work itself out, and it did. And there wasn't another depression until 1933, and we're going to explain why that happened later on. And it was not because of capitalism. Competition was natural and constructive once. Where do you think you're competing today? Many of you think you are. Against whom? Against Rockefeller, about as if I had a wheelbarrow and competed against Santa Fe from here to Kansas City. That is about the way you're competing. But will your boys not even have that chance if capitalism lives? You will hear the late panic. It is very late. It is going to be very late. The panic will be with us 5 years from now. That would be 1913. Didn't happen. And it will continue from now till then. Didn't happen. There was no panic in 1908 to speak of, or very little one. When we stop clutching at each other's throats, when we have stopped enslaving each other, we will stand together, hands clasped, and be friends. We will be comrades. We will be brothers. We will begin the march to the grandest civilization human race has ever known. Well, in fact, what Debs and his buddy pals out there gave us was the worst murder, death, and destruction in all of human history. And do not forget for a moment that fascism is of the same ilk as communism and socialism. Why? Because it is based on the same foundation, the labor theory of value. And so if you lump in Hitler and Mussolini's fascism along with Stalin, Mao, Fidel, Kim Jong-un, all those guys, you're looking at a death total that far exceeds 100 million people to establish Debs' society that has never worked on the face of the earth. Even China now is starting to fall apart. All right, finally we got through that. I'll see you next time. We'll get back to Patriots history and the reading there.